After the tragic death of my parents, my greedy husband and mother-in-law stormed into my house at night, demanding a share of my $50 million inheritance. When I refused, they both struck me brutally, leaving me severely injured. They kicked me out of my house at midnight, locking the door behind them as I cried for help. But they refused to listen. The very next day, I returned with revenge. When they woke up, they could never have imagined the shocking surprise that would bring them to their knees. My name is Lily Rose. I'm 40 years old, a financial consultant living in Seattle, Washington. My life wasn't always filled with betrayal and chaos. Just a few months ago, I thought I had everything: a loving husband, a fulfilling career, and two incredible parents who believed in me more than I ever believed in myself. But life has a cruel way of taking everything from you, piece by piece, until you're left fighting for survival. It all began when my parents passed away unexpectedly in a car accident. They were everything to me. Losing them so suddenly was like losing a part of myself. Their absence created a void that nothing could fill. But they didn't just leave me their love and memories. They left me their legacy. A $50 million estate. It wasn't just about the money. That inheritance symbolized their hard work, sacrifices, and dreams for my future. I swore to protect it with everything I had. At first, my husband, Jason, seemed supportive. We had been married for over 10 years, and I believed we were a team. Jason told me we'd honor my parents' memory together and take care of their estate responsibly. His mother, Martha, who had always been polite but distant, also appeared sympathetic. At first I was naive enough to believe they cared about me and my loss. For the first few weeks after the funeral, I focused on organizing my parents' affairs. Their estate consisted of properties, investments, and businesses they had built from the ground up. Managing it was overwhelming, but I poured myself into the work. I wanted to make them proud, even in their absence. Then the cracks began to show. It started with little things. Jason making comments about how I needed to lighten the load and let him handle some of the finances. I brushed it off, thinking he was just trying to help. But then, Martha began dropping hints, subtle at first, about how my parents' wealth should benefit the whole family. "Lily," she said one evening over dinner, her voice sweet but calculated, "don't you think your parents would have wanted Jason and you to share the fortune with those who've supported you? After all, family is everything." I smiled politely, trying to suppress my irritation. "Martha, my parents worked their entire lives for this. It's their legacy. I want to protect it and honor their memory." Her expression tightened, but she didn't argue further. I should have seen the warning signs. But grief blinded me. I convinced myself it was just a misunderstanding. Over the next few weeks, Martha's hints became sharper and more frequent. Jason began to echo her sentiments, suggesting we invest in properties or luxury items for the family. The tension in the house grew thicker with every passing day. One evening, Jason brought up the idea of buying a vacation home. "Lily, it'd be great for all of us. A place where we could gather, relax, and enjoy life. Think about it. It would only cost around $5 million. It's nothing compared to the estate." I stared at him, disbelief coursing through me. "Jason, that's not what this money is for. My parents didn't leave it behind for vacations or luxury homes. They left it to secure the future, to build something meaningful." His face darkened, but he didn't push further. At least not then. Martha, however, didn't stop. She began visiting unannounced, inspecting my parents' home as if it were already hers. Her tone grew harsher, her words sharper. "You're being selfish, Lily," she said one afternoon, her voice dripping with disdain. "Your parents wouldn't want you hoarding their wealth while the rest of the family struggles. It's disgraceful." I clenched my fists. holding back the anger threatening to spill out. This isn't about hoarding, Martha. It's about preserving what they built. You wouldn't understand because you didn't know them like I did. Her glare sent chills down my spine. But I refused to back down. Things took a darker turn one night. Jason and Martha arrived together. Uninvited. Their faces were filled with determination. I was sitting in the living room, going over some documents when they barged in. "We need to talk," Jason said, his voice cold and firm. I set my papers aside, uneasy. "What's going on?" Quote. Martha crossed her arms. "Enough of this nonsense. Lily, it's time you stop being so selfish and start thinking about the family. We're taking control of this estate, whether you like it or not." Her words sent a wave of anger and fear through me. "You have no right to take anything. This is my parents' legacy, and I won't let you destroy it." Jason stepped forward, his expression hardening. "Don't make this difficult, Lily. We've supported you long enough. It's time you give back." I stood up, trembling with a mix of rage and disbelief. "Supported me? You mean manipulated me? You're not taking a single penny from my parents' estate." Martha's eyes narrowed, and Jason's jaw tightened. I didn't realize just how far they were willing to go. That night marked the beginning of the nightmare I never saw coming. I had no idea how ruthless Jason and Martha could be until that fateful night. What started as a heated argument spiraled into something far more sinister. A night that would shatter any remaining illusion of trust I had in them. It was late, maybe 10 p.m. I was still reeling from the confrontation earlier that evening. Jason had barely spoken a word after Martha left, avoiding eye contact as he sat in the corner, scrolling on his phone. The silence between us was suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing. Then, without warning, the front door slammed open. Martha stormed in, her face twisted with fury, and behind her was Jason, his expression unreadable but tense. My heart sank. I should have known they wouldn't let this go. "Lily, this ends tonight," Martha spat, her voice sharp and venomous. "You're going to sign over control of the estate, or we'll make sure you regret it." I stood my ground, though fear bubbled beneath the surface. "You can threaten me all you want, Martha, but I'm not signing anything. This is my parents' legacy, and I won't let you ruin it." Jason finally spoke, his voice low and cold. "Don't be stubborn, Lily. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Just sign the papers." I looked at him, my husband of 10 years. The man I thought would always protect me. "Jason, how can you do this? How can you stand there and side with her? I'm your wife." His eyes flickered with something. Guilt, maybe, or shame, but he didn't waver. "You've left me no choice, Lily. Family comes first, and you're acting like this is all yours." "It is all mine," I snapped, my voice trembling. "My parents worked their entire lives to build this, and you have no right to take it from me." That's when Martha lost it. She lunged toward me, grabbing my arm so tightly that I winced. "You ungrateful little brat," she hissed. "If it weren't for us, you'd have nothing." Nothing. Quote. I yanked my arm away, my pulse racing. "Get out of my house. Both of you," I shouted, hoping my voice would mask the growing fear inside me. But they didn't leave. Instead, Jason stepped forward, his face hard as stone. "You brought this on yourself," he said. Before I could react, he shoved me backward. I stumbled, hitting the edge of the coffee table and falling hard onto the floor. My body screamed in pain, but the physical ache was nothing compared to the betrayal burning in my chest. "Jason," I whispered, looking up at him, my voice filled with disbelief. "How could you?" Quote. He didn't answer. Martha, emboldened by his actions, grabbed the documents she had brought with her and threw them onto the table. "Sign them," she barked, "or you'll wish you had." I pushed myself to my feet, shaking, I'm not signing anything, I said firmly, though my voice trembled. And you'll regret this. Jason's expression darkened. Fine. If that's how you want to play it. Before I could process what was happening, he grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the door. I struggled, but he was stronger. And Martha was right there, blocking my escape. Let me go, I screamed, kicking and twisting. But they didn't stop. They opened the front door and pushed me out into the cold night. I tripped on the steps, landing hard on the pavement. The sharp chill of the night air bit into my skin as I scrambled to my feet. Martha's voice rang out behind me. Don't come back until you're ready to do what's right. The door slammed shut, leaving me standing there, battered and bruised, both physically and emotionally. For a moment, I just stood there, stunned. My own husband and mother-in-law had just thrown me out of my house. My house. Like I was nothing. I didn't know where to go or what to do. My entire life had been upended in a single night. But as I stood there, shivering and humiliated, something inside me shifted. The fear and despair that had gripped me moments before began to give way to something else. Anger. How dare they? How dare they think they could take everything from me? My parents didn't work their entire lives to build this estate so it could be handed over to two greedy, manipulative people who thought they could bully me into submission. I wouldn't let them win. With every painful step I took away from the house, my resolve grew stronger. They thought they had broken me, but they were wrong. They had just awakened a side of me I didn't even know existed. I pulled out my phone and dialed the only person I knew I could trust in that moment. Mr. Grant, my parents' attorney. His voice was calm and steady, a lifeline in the storm. Lily, what happened? He asked, concern evident in his tone. I told him everything. The confrontation, the assault, how Jason and Martha had thrown me out of my own home. This is unacceptable, Mr. Grant said firmly. We'll take legal action immediately. They won't get away with this. For the first time that night, I felt a glimmer of hope. They might have tried to destroy me, but I wasn't going to let them succeed. The morning after that horrifying night, I woke up on a friend's couch, my body sore and my mind spinning. I could still hear their voices. Jason's cold, calculated tone and Martha's hateful demands echoing in my head. But this time, I didn't cry. I didn't feel helpless. All I felt was determination. If they thought they could take everything from me, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. I met with Mr. Grant the very next day. He was the attorney my parents had trusted for years. A man who knew the ins and outs of their estate better than anyone else. When I sat across from him in his office, my hands trembling slightly, I told him everything. How Jason and Martha had turned on me. How they had physically assaulted me. And how they had thrown me out of my own house. They can't get away with this, I said, my voice steady but firm. I need your help to stop them. Mr. Grant nodded, his expression serious. Don't worry, Lily. We'll make sure they face the consequences for their actions. First, we'll file for a restraining order to keep them away from you in the estate. Then we'll begin gathering evidence to build a solid case against them. I felt a flicker of hope. What kind of evidence do we need? I asked. Everything you can provide, he replied. Medical records documenting your injuries. Messages or emails showing their manipulative behavior. And financial records proving their attempts to take over the estate. The more we have, the stronger our case will be. Over the next few days, I threw myself into the work. I went to the hospital to get my injuries documented. Bruises on my arms, scratches on my hands, and the soreness in my back from being shoved onto the pavement. I scoured my phone for texts and emails from Jason and Martha, compiling every snide remark and demand they had ever made. With Mr. Grant's help, I also reviewed the financial accounts tied to the estate. looking for any irregularities that could prove their intent to seize control. It wasn't easy. Every piece of evidence I uncovered felt like a fresh wound, a reminder of how deeply they had betrayed me. But it also fueled my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for my parents, for the legacy they had worked so hard to leave behind. Then came the restraining order. Mr. Grant worked quickly, filing the necessary paperwork with the court. Within a week, a judge approved it, legally barring Jason and Martha from coming near me or the estate. It was a small victory, but it gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in weeks. Of course, they didn't take it well. Jason called me one evening, his voice dripping with false charm. "Lily, we don't have to do this. We're family. Let's just sit down and work this out." "Family?" I scoffed, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You and your mother beat me and threw me out of my own house. Do you really think I'll forgive you after that?" Quote. His tone turned cold. "You're making a mistake. You're going to regret this." "No, Jason," I said firmly. "The only mistake I made was trusting you." I hung up, my hand shaking, but my resolve stronger than ever. They weren't going to intimidate me. Not anymore. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings and strategy sessions. Mr. Grant and his team were meticulous, building a case that left no room for doubt. We collected testimonies from neighbors who had witnessed Jason and Martha's late-night visits to my house. We gathered financial records showing Jason's attempts to transfer funds from the estate to accounts in his name, and we prepared the medical evidence of my injuries, which painted a clear picture of their violent behavior. When the court date finally arrived, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. As I sat in the courtroom, watching Jason and Martha enter with their lawyer, I couldn't help but notice the smug expression on their faces. They still thought they were going to win. But as the proceedings began, it became clear they had underestimated me. Mr. Grant presented our evidence piece by piece. Each revelation chipped away at their facade. The texts and emails showed their manipulative tactics. The financial records proved their greed, and the medical reports left no doubt about the physical assault. Jason's lawyer tried to spin the story, painting me as unstable and uncooperative. But when I took the stand and recounted the events of that night, the way Jason shoved me, the way Martha grabbed and berated me, it was clear who the real villains were. As I spoke, I saw Jason's expression shift from smug to panicked. For the first time, he realized he was losing. Martha, meanwhile, glared at me with pure hatred. But even she couldn't deny the weight of the evidence against her. The trial lasted 3 days. On the final day, the judge delivered the verdict. Guilty. Jason and Martha were sentenced to prison for their crimes. And the court ruled in my favor, affirming my sole ownership of the estate. As the BFFs escorted them out of the courtroom, Martha shouted, "This isn't over. Lily, you'll regret this." But I didn't feel fear. I felt relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt free. The day Jason and Martha were sentenced felt like waking up from a nightmare. As I walked out of the courtroom, a weight I didn't even realize I had been carrying finally lifted. For the first time in months, I felt free, not just from their greed and manipulation, but from the fear they had planted in my heart. But freedom wasn't the end of the journey. I still had to rebuild my life, piece by piece, and take control of the legacy my parents left me. Their estate, their dreams, it was all still intact. But it needed care, direction, and a fresh start, and I was ready to give it everything I had. I started with the house. The same house Jason and Martha had tried to steal from me. It had always been my parents' pride and joy, a home filled with love and warmth. But after everything that had happened, it felt tainted, like a place haunted by betrayal. I knew I couldn't leave it that way, so I decided to transform it. I hired a team of contractors and designers, pouring myself into every detail of the renovation. The dark, heavy furniture was replaced with bright, airy pieces. The walls were painted in soft, calming colors that made the space feel open and welcoming. The living room, once a place of tension and conflict, became a vibrant, cozy area for entertaining. I turned the study, where so many confrontations had taken place, into a creative workspace filled with plants, light, and everything I needed to focus on my work as a financial consultant. Every change I made to the house felt like reclaiming a part of myself. It wasn't just a renovation. It was a rebirth. By the time the work was finished, the house no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like home. At the same time, I threw myself into managing my parents' estate, with the help of Mr. Grant and a team of trusted advisors. I reorganized the businesses my parents had left behind. I invested in new ventures that aligned with their values, focusing on sustainability and community impact. One of the properties I owned became a shelter for women who had faced abuse and homelessness, a cause that now felt deeply personal to me. As the estate grew, so did my confidence. For years, I had lived in the shadow of my parents' success, doubting whether I could ever live up to their legacy. But now, I realized that their strength was in me. I wasn't just preserving their dreams. I was building my own. The hardest part of the journey, though, was facing the emotional scars left behind by Jason's betrayal. For 10 years, I had trusted him, loved him, and believed in him. Letting go of that pain wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I spent hours in therapy working through the anger, the hurt, and the lingering doubts about myself. Slowly, I began to heal. I also started reconnecting with old friends, people I had drifted away from during my marriage. Their support reminded me of the kind of love and loyalty I had been missing for so long. I even started mentoring young women in my field, sharing my experiences and helping them navigate challenges in their careers. Giving back became a source of healing and purpose for me. One evening, months after the trial, I stood on the balcony of my newly renovated home, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. This was the view my parents had loved so much, the view they had worked their whole lives to protect, and now it was mine. But this wasn't just about reclaiming what was taken from me. It was about learning who I truly was. Someone stronger than I ever thought possible. Someone who refused to be defined by betrayal or loss. Jason and Martha had tried to destroy me, but in the end, they only made me stronger. The journey wasn't easy, and the scars they left will always be a part of me. But those scars are also a testament to my resilience. They remind me of everything I've overcome, everything I've built, and everything I've yet to achieve. As I stood there, the cool breeze brushing against my skin, I thought of my parents. I hoped they could see me standing in the home they built, carrying their dreams forward. They had given me the tools to survive, to fight, and to rebuild. And I knew, deep in my heart, that I had honored their legacy in the best way possible, by becoming the person they always believed I could be.